Right. So you're back in South Africa as the propaganda unit.
That's right.
What happens then?
Very little, actually. I mean, that was, you know, we had made some contributions before, because one of the things that we did, and I never followed through to the extent to which it was used, was travelling by train. We were able to reconnoitre the train as a possible transit route for moving weapons into the country. We discovered, for example, the toilets in the train, there were compartments with the right sort of key. You could actually open the compartments and they would
put stuff in.
And you could put stuff in. And we reconnoitred that by taking down a load of literature a year or so before we came back, which we then put in the toilets in the train, and then retrieved just before we got into Cape Town station, and then we used a dead letterbox, hid it in a kind of cache in Cape Town, and then the unit that was looking for the literature, wanted the literature, came and picked it up from the cache sometime after that.
And the literature was then distributed clandestinely?
It would have been, yeah.
And how were you communicated with as the propaganda unit underground, as it were?
We had a very cumbersome system, a coding system that we used, which involved a couple of books. It was a code that was based on books and transcriptions of letters. So you had to identify which book, which page, and which paragraph on the page you were starting from. And then you could use your text that you wanted to send, use the letters there, and then each letter became a number, which you then very laboriously, it was an extremely slow process. It was the days before, with computers one could have done it very nicely on a computer system. You had to sort of hand code each number and write each number down, and essentially what we did is we photographed that and then hid the negative. You buy something like a toy, for example, in a little plastic package, and if you're very careful you can open the plastic package in a way that it doesn't look like it's been opened, secretes the negative somewhere inside the toy, break off a seat, put it under the seat and glue the seat back on, for example, if it's a truck, something like that, and then post it off to somebody as a birthday gift.
Yes. So did you receive communications? I mean, were you given instructions, as it were?
No, I mean, that was some of the problem, because we were told to wait, and we waited, and we waited. I believe that we were passed over to Operation Vula, kind of a year or two before Nelson Mandela came out. But in the handover, somehow the methods of communication with us were lost. We also had a backup system, quite a complicated little system involving postcards, where the picture on the postcard that you chose, so there were categories like flowers and landscapes and architecture, whatever, and each one had a particular significance to our contacts or our handlers outside the country. At a certain point in time we got very frustrated with what was happening and the lack of communication, and the fact that there was actually at that time a very active struggle going on. The UDF was campaigning, there were all sorts of public demonstrations and public activities going on, which we obviously, for obvious reasons, couldn't be part of. And so we eventually sent a message out saying, please contact us. We haven't heard from anybody.
Yeah. And what happened?
A courier was sent down.
Right.
And it was a very strange, because we worked out a couple of places at which handovers of materials, etc., could take place. And a courier was sent down, I think it was a young British woman. I subsequently heard her name, but I've forgotten it now. Was sent down to give a message to us, and what you call a blind meeting, essentially.
And where did that take place?
That was set up in a shopping centre in Johannesburg. And it was actually quite an amusing sort of incident, because we knew where the handover was supposed to take place, and as the people on the ground here, part of our job was to conduct surveillance to make sure that we weren't being followed. So you did a thing called a detection route, which involved you doing a series of pre-planned activities, And that would usually involve going to shopping centres, doing a bit of shopping, but you planned the route in such a way that if somebody were following you,
you would see them.
You would see them.
Yeah.
Things like you would walk down a corridor with a mirror at the other end, and you could see whether somebody was coming down behind you, turn around and go up an escalator again. You could look back and see whether people following you. Little kind of tricks like that. And then you would get to the venue of the meeting, and you would do some work there to make sure that the venue itself wasn't compromised and wasn't under surveillance.
So the British woman turned up, gave you the...
Well, the funny thing was, my ex-wife and I came to the venue obviously from different directions, and I actually came by bus. And the amusing thing was I actually spotted her on the bus.
Okay.
She was sitting 3 or 4 seats in front of me in the bus, and was carrying something that in South Africa would have been a dead giveaway, because white people didn't carry those very large kind of plastic shopping bags that were very prevalent in Zimbabwe, which is what she had. And it just stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, I guess I knew I was expecting there would be somebody there, and I just looked at this and I thought, this has to be her. And she got off the bus and went into the shopping centre, and I followed and did my sort of manoeuvres and stuff. Found out that, or believed that we weren't actually, but believed that we weren't being followed. And she eventually met my ex-wife in the ladies' loo, and passed over
the bag
to my ex-wife.
And what were the instructions?
Basically, wait for more instructions, I think. There was another time when we were asked. We did go back up to Zimbabwe and meet people at Victoria Falls. We went up on a kind of tourist holiday, camped out at Victoria Falls, and then were met by our people and given some additional kind of briefing and additional sets of instructions, which I think if you'd had about a 48-hour day and you were not unemployed, you probably could have carried them out. I mean, it was just an impossible load of stuff that was given to us.
So Mandela then came out of jail.
And
at that point, what did you do?
Well, we were still underground. I remember it well, because I was working in the Carlton Centre at the time, and these kind of like fleets of taxis and cheering people kind of heading in the direction of Soweto through town, kind of singing and chanting, and it was a very, very exciting time. But given one's situation, we were still underground. One couldn't sort of be too openly jubilant. You sort of watch the kind of struggle passing before your eyes, and have to bite your tongue and let it go past.
So how did you go overground?
It was a couple of years later, in fact, in 1992, when again, or still, we hadn't actually been given anything concrete and specific to do. And we eventually walked into the SACP offices in downtown Johannesburg, found Jeremy Cronin, and without speaking, indicated to him that we wanted to talk, and he found a place, and we explained who we were, and the fact that we were mightily annoyed. We'd been sitting waiting for 4 years and hadn't been given anything concrete and specific to do. And he put us in touch with local structures, and we essentially came out above ground
at that point.
At that point in time, we were asked by some people by Ronnie Castles, in fact, to stay underground, because obviously negotiations were ongoing, and it was essential during negotiations that certain underground structures were kept in place, and we were asked to stay on underground. The person who was our sort of principal handler at the time actually spoke to us and said, no, don't.
You
folks have been frustrated enough. It's time to get involved in
a proper life.
And that's essentially what we did.
But there was a whole underground structure, wasn't there, that included people looking after weapons, taking part in armed action.
No, I mean, friends of ours had a house in which weapons were stored, and where people, ostensibly gardeners and cooks and things like that, lived. There was a house close to where we lived in Johannesburg, we didn't know about it at the time, which had a weapons cache underneath in the cellar, behind sort of piles of firewood that were stored in the cellar. So there were quite extensive underground structures, and a number of them obviously for obvious reasons, kept in place until 1994.